Hello and welcome to the More to Life podcast. I am your host, Elle Mace, and today we are joined by the lovely and wonderful Katherine Harrold, who is a writer and is also just launching her own podcast. Hi, Katherine.
Hi. Thank you
Hello,
so
how
much for
are
having
you?
me. I'm doing really well.
Good,
Uh,
amazing. So just give a little bit of an introduction as to like who you are, a little bit about yourself.
okay. Yeah, I'm a screenwriter. I live in Los Angeles, California, which is a total cliche. And yeah, I have quite a varied background. I've been an entrepreneur and done a whole bunch of things, but I live in LA. I'm a writer. I'm in this magical community of humans and have decided to start a podcast about magic. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Amazing, magic. Love that. So you don't mind for me sharing that you are a previous client of mine. We worked together for a while on, mainly things around food and the body and the disordered eating piece. But the reason that you've come to join us today is because you are going to share your story of your relationship with your mum, because you had a very difficult relationship with your mom. You had a narcissistic mother. And so this is going to be amazing. So thank you for being so vulnerable and open to sharing. And also I'm guessing what people will see as you kind of go through your story is the link between having such a difficult relationship with your mom and then your coping mechanisms, which was for you, the food piece, the disordered eating. But yeah, so where do we start? There is quite a high link between our relationship with food, our relationship with our body, and our self-worth and self-esteem, and our relationship to our parents. So, actually I do have a lot of clients who do have uh difficult parents, whether they are difficult, the relationship's difficult, and certainly the word narcissistic does keep coming up here. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So let's start with you telling us about your relationship in a nutshell with your mom, and then I'm going to dive in with some questions.
Oh boy, my relationship in a nutshell. Yeah, I think the simplest way to explain my relationship with my mom is to think of the fairy tale Rapunzel
Yeah.
and just put that in the modern day. So yeah, I mean, quick like scan of my family. My mom was married 4 times. She had four children. I was the youngest. And by the time I came around, my dad was her last husband. And they stayed together for like maybe a year after I was born, because she was extremely controlling and and very difficult to live with. And my dad carried his own pieces of that as well. I don't want to lay it all on her shoulders. um and also like all of my siblings ran away from home when I was a baby and went back to live with like either their dad or their stepdad, and so I grew up with it just being like just me and my mom.
Mm.
And if you look at the difference between how my I responded to how my siblings responded, I think that was like a key factor, is like it was just me and her.
Mm.
And so yeah, when I was about 5, there was, this like large custody battle started between my mom and my dad. And I think one of the most damaging things my mom did was like force me to push my dad away.
Yeah.
um I think one time expressed like, oh, I feel kind of strange around my dad, and my dad was a little like, God love him, he's passed away, and so I love him so much and we made peace, but he was, emotionally distant at that time in his life. He hadn't worked through his own stuff. So I think I was just expressing that to my mom. And she just like grabbed hold of that and she was going to save me from him, and like had me literally like tell him, you're not my father. We were Christians, and so she's like, you had like, I had the script like, you're not my father. My father is in heaven and you're from the devil.
Mm.
And yeah, imagine telling that to your dad when you're getting in the car to go on a visit that's court mandated.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
awkward at all. Um, and so yeah, that lasted from about 5 to 10, I think. 5 to 10, 11, somewhere in there. And it was this endless cycle of like me going with my dad, holding that line for like 2 or 3 hours. And then I would crumble and I would actually have fun with my dad. And then I would get home and I would be honest with my mom. And then she would emotionally distance from me. And then I would have to beg her forgiveness. And it was just a lot. And that was like 5 to 10. And yeah, and then there was just, I mean, I don't want to give you like my whole bio, but there was just a lot of like keeping me isolated. You know, when I was in 7th grade, she pulled me out of school and started homeschooling me. She like, and again, it was always to save me because I was being bullied. And so, you know, instead of like teaching me how to cope with that, she just pulled me out and started homeschooling me. And then, you know, then like purity culture comes around and she decides she's going to pick my husband and I'm not allowed to date. And I mean, like literally like betrothal, like you know, me and a goat gets handed to some guy. And that really lasted till I was about 21. And then we moved to Fort Worth, Texas to be part of a church. And about less than a year after we moved to Texas, my sister committed suicide. And that was really when, well, let me back up a little bit just to give context for the disordered eating. Eating was always disordered in my house. Like when I was a baby, she was a super strict vegetarian up until about 5 or 6. And so like all sorts of like processed foods and sugar is evil and white flour is evil. And, you know, my first ice cream was tofuti. And so like that was my childhood. And then at some point it like switched to like her like really getting into all the Southern food. We're living in South Carolina and it's, you know, or sorry, North Carolina. And there was just a lot of eating and then fasting and then eating and then fasting and then eating and then fasting. And when I was homeschooled, there were like binge days where we just did nothing but eat. You know, it's like, oh, we're just going to watch movies. And so I was a chubby teenager, as you might imagine. And when I got to when my sister committed suicide, and that just like rocked me because yeah, like I had prayed so hard for her and for our family. And I just felt like, gosh, I literally, like, I remember literally thinking, like, I have got to take control of my life. Life is short and like time is a waste. And so the only thing that I could control at that point was my body and what I put in it. And so that was really when the anorexic side of the eating disorder started. And so I started restricting and I started working out a ton. And it was insane. And you know, at this point you think like, well, you're 21 years old, why can't you control more? And it's so hard to describe, but my mom had just raised me with so much control. I was constantly hearing, you know, like, you're not an honorable daughter. If you were just an honorable daughter, everything in our house would be, you know, would be great. And like scriptures were getting used against me. And I'm a very like, I'm not a Christian anymore, which we can get into, but still very much believe in one creator and source. And I'm very spiritual. So I have that side to me. I've always had a very spiritual side, and it was really easy to use that against me. And so, yeah, I got to 21 and that really took root. And long story short, I mean, we started a business together and all sorts of stuff. Everything was enmeshed. I was basically like her spouse. You know, both of our names were on the mortgage. I didn't have my own checking account until I was 35 years old. You know, she had a hold of all of my credit cards, opened up a ton of credit cards in my name. So it was just very, very enmeshed. And when I was 34, I, through a long series of events, finally woke up and started talking to somebody, and had literally never like voiced anything to anyone. I'd always been my mom's protector. I'd always been the one that like kept everybody from attacking her.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a big dynamic. And so for the first time, like I remember being so conflicted about talking to anybody, but I did. And when I did, like I ended up getting told like, this is manipulation and control. And I was like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything she's been telling me isn't like the gospel truth. And it was so interesting because I now know like my body knew the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That
I
was
remember,
that was my question too. My next question was, do you think at any point from 0, well, 2 or 3 or whatever, to 34, deep down you knew this wasn't right, or did you feel like it was completely normal relationship?
no, I mean, here's the best way that I can describe the dynamic. Like, I definitely, especially when I reached about 12 years old, I definitely started being like, this is weird, you know? Um, I think my mom was my hero up until, well, right after the custody battle, actually. I remember, she had told me like if I pushed my dad away, everything would be good. And I had. And so he had finally given her custody. And I remember the first time that I did something she didn't like after that, then she threatened to send me to live with him. And that was when I like something snapped in me. I stopped trusting her.
Mm.
And at the same time, it was the religious thing. It was the spiritual aspect of it that really kept me looped in because I was like, I mean, there's so many scriptures, honor your father and your mother, obey the obedience commandment, So like all of that in the culture that I was in is what I think really like kept me so under wraps and really just trying to please God. And
Mm.
yet at the same time, like in my teenage years and in my 20s, I I was more of the parent than she was in so many ways. It was a very interesting dynamic. So I wasn't always like laying down and taking everything. In a lot of ways, I was like, it's almost like codependent would treat an alcoholic. It's like, because my mom was sick. Also, that's another aspect. She was like massively sick. So I was literally nursing her all the time. So there's this dynamic of like, me cleaning up the, pardon my French, shit
Ah,
when she like can't make it to the toilet, So it was very strange.
yeah, interesting.
Um, and yet she always had that psychological control over me.
Yes.
Yeah.
God.
So but when I woke up, I remember it being like, because it literally was like a switch. I was like, oh, now my life makes sense. Like
Yeah.
I called the woman that I had talked to, and I told her, I was like, this makes so much sense now.
Yeah. So at that day when she had won the custody battle and then you did something and she said, I'll send you to live with your father, and something clicked within you. The following period, days, weeks, months, or whatever, years, did you show any signs to her that you were on to her, like that you weren't so kind of just like surrendering to her? And if you did, was she then becoming more kind of out of control, or was there then a shift with her as well?
Yeah, there was definitely a shift. I don't know that I would say that I was on to her.
Mm.
Like, I had no clue she was a narcissist. I had no clue I couldn't have put the words to it to say I'm being controlled and manipulated.
Yeah.
What I did feel was this is incredibly unfair. Like, you promised me something, I did exactly what you said, and now you're breaking your word.
Mm.
And and the thing is, it's so hard to describe with a narcissist because they're really like, it's like voodoo.
Yeah.
you know so like even though I'm aware like you're breaking your word, they have this way of convincing you that they're doing it because you're so screwed up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I would be the perfect mother if you weren't such a shitty child. Pardon my, am I said okay to cuss?
No, yeah.
Okay.
That's the way. Yeah.
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 It's like, I remember actually like this, the perfect example of this was when everything was crumbling when I was 34. I remember looking at her and literally saying the words, Mom, I'm just asking you to unconditionally love me. Like, I
Mm.
just want to know you'll love me no matter what.
Mm.
because she was like making it all about, if you don't give up this guy friend that you have, then we're done, which was ridiculous because anyway, that's a whole other story. But she looked at me and I looked at her and I said that, and she looked at me and she said, it is the job of the child to unconditionally love the parent first. And that frees up the child to love the parent, or sorry, frees up the parent to love the child unconditionally,
Ooh.
which she genuinely believed.
Yeah. And so was that her narrative growing up?
Yeah. So the interesting part with my mom, I wish I knew more. I think she's disassociated like so completely, because when people bring up her father, especially, she gets very like, I remember watching my aunt one time just apologize and say, I'm sorry for the way you grew up. And my mom got super defensive. And she literally, like, her like programmed line is, my dad hung the moon. Um, I have thoughts, and I've talked to a couple of people that knew her when she was younger. And I also found, this is interesting too, she left when everything crumbled. She like left all of her like mementos and stuff in the bathtub of the house that we used to live in. And so I'm like, sifting through all this stuff, and I found a stack full of letters from her dad to her mom before and after they were married, and to like 1930 something, um and the tone of the letters was exactly the tone of my mother. I remember reading it and being like, okay, but that's all I have to go on. So yes, in answer to your question, yes, but I don't have a lot of specifics. I know she went through trauma, and I know that what she received. I have some, I don't even want to say what I think happened because I don't have any proof, and that's her story. But yeah, I think she went through a really rough time.
Yeah. So with that small amount of insight that you have, what I have found, in just working with people and life in general, is that there's often a pull between feeling really sorry for them and like understanding why they are the way they are, and then being like, but I need to break away, and kind of almost staying in it because that they're traumatized, they've got their own problems. So did you find that day when you broke it off, did you feel this huge pull between feel sorry for her and actually I need to be there for her because she's kind of broken, so I have to go for myself?
Yeah. I mean, funny story to, speak to my spiritual side. I mean, what you just, I'll say this, the dynamic you just described was my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what it was. Like, there was this part of me that knew, like, especially towards the end, she got really, really, yeah, it was just really bizarre at
Yeah.
the end. And, um, like stalking me and breaking into my Facebook account and, just all kinds of stuff, and like literally following me around the house, like while I'm getting dressed for work, and won't, it was weird.
Yeah.
Um, and by that point, then yes, there's this real part of me that's like, man, something is like really wrong here. Um, and at this point, I'm still like very much in the church model. So I would have said God, and still would, like, God, source. I remember very clearly hearing, I was taking a walk, and I remember very clearly hearing, she needs to learn to rely on me, and so you need to leave. Which was the perfect thing to tell a really, really codependent person, because if God had said to me, you need to leave because you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, I'd have tried to figure out a way to stay and do that.
Yeah.
But because I knew that it would be better for her if I left, that gave me the strength. Because after I told her I was leaving, like, I would wake up and she'd be sitting on my bed crying and be like, don't let this tear us apart. Don't let this tear us apart. And, she threatened to call the cops on me the next night. Like, it was like very hard to actually get out of that house once I said I was leaving, because she really, really tried to convince me and manipulate me into staying. But I had that line,
Mm.
that thing to keep going back to, which I'm so grateful to the divine for that, because otherwise I don't think I would have left.
Yeah. Yeah, that twist on it, that play on words has kind of helped you to make that decision to go. But it also sounds like, you were pushed to a level that a lot of people might not get to, where they're in a very toxic relationship because a person's a narcissist, whether it's a parent or a romantic relationship. But it's never pushed so far with you that it was like kind of like, this is so crazy that I have to go. It's a kind of step before that where it's like, where it's still total confusion and
Yeah.
total like, maybe it will be okay, maybe it will change, and that like really awful point where there's like where someone just stays.
Yeah. Well, and I think the key to that is what I mentioned earlier. I think when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, again, their superpower is making you think that you're the problem.
Yeah.
So that's literally what kept me there so long. I truly, as much as I could look at her and see like, oh, this is not right, I truly believe that if I fixed myself, then she would change. And I think that's what keeps most people in any kind of abusive relationship, whether it's, physically abusive, emotionally, sexually, any of those kind of things. What the abuser does is they project their shame onto you, they project their brokenness onto you, and you internalize it.
Yeah.
And because and that's what separates a codependent from a narcissist. The narcissist projects and the codependent absorbs. And it literally is the same wound, just a different response.
Yeah.
Like the narcissist has experiences the same thing. They're getting conditionally loved, they're being denied connection and love and all of that kind of stuff. It's just the way that their psyche responds is what makes it different.
Yeah.
um but I think, like, yeah, I think the key to reaching the point where you can leave is recognizing, like, de-externalizing that and recognizing that actually you're not the problem. And it is tricky if they don't get like as bizarre as my mom got at the end.
That's it, isn't it? It's almost easier that she really lost it.
Yeah, which again, I do believe in like some guiding force that really helps us out in life, and the circumstances that came into my life. I met a guy that I was attracted to, and it just literally over the span of a year just drove her nuts,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
it was the first thing I wouldn't let go of. I had always let go of everything else, going to college and, you know, creativity and dating and singing and all these things, dreams that I had, I had always just given them up. And for some reason, my insides were like, not this time.
Yeah.
And so and I guess I would say to anybody who thinks they're in a codependent relation, or sorry, a narcissistic relationship, that is the best way to find out. Like, if you just start not caving the way that you used to cave, and you can do it on tiny things, and then you watch their response, because that's when a narcissist is when you start setting a boundary.
Mm.
Their response to it is what's going to tell you whether or not you're really dealing with somebody that you really should get away from.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. So this might, yeah, I'm wondering if you've got any examples here, but there's obviously some obvious examples that, well, seem quite obvious to us, like stalking you, breaking into your Facebook and stuff. But can you give any examples to anyone listening who might be in a relationship, or, a parent or whatever, whoever, where they're more subtle, that actually in the moment you saw it as love and trust or whatever, but on reflection now you're like, yeah, that was kind of like sly, that was a kind of like more covert rather than the kind of really obvious behaviors that happened.
Yeah, totally. um a couple of things are coming to my mind. The subtle ones are harder to pick up, but I would say one of the ways that you can really tell with a narcissist is it's that love, well, it's so typical. They do this love bombing thing,
Mm.
usually at the very beginning of the relationship. If it's a parent, then that's a little harder to track. But there's this love bombing thing where like you are the sun in the sky,
Yeah.
you know, and you are like the most amazing thing. And there's presents and there's, all this kind of thing. And this cycle will happen repeatedly. So then there's that phase, and then the love gets withdrawn. And
Mm.
that's literally how they control you. It's like they get you, they just bomb you with something that every heart is wired to want.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
then when they withdraw it, that's literally what puts the seed in your mind that you're the problem. So, a real life example of that with my mom would be, I remember when I was younger, I think one of the, yeah, like my sisters would come visit, for instance. And, when my sisters weren't there, I was like the golden, I was the sun and the moon all in one. And then my sisters would come and things would inevitably get tense between them.
Mm.
And then it just became this like, this is the manipulative thing. Like she never actually, well, sometimes she did. She would like literally tell me, go out there and like talk to them, tell them they need to honor me, Or the more subtle version of that would be like she just kind of start pouting and I would know that she was upset. And so then I would on my own, she would like start pouting and like not talk to me either.
Ah.
And so then on my own, I would go out there and defend her because I'm like, oh, well, like I need to get her to be okay. And I do think that's one of the more subtle things that narcissists do. Is it's not really subtle. It's actually super toxic, but the silent treatment.
Oh my gosh, as you're talking, I'm literally like, hell yes. The silent treatment, it
Mhm.
can be so toxic.
It's maddening. I remember being 7 years old and she hadn't talked to me for 3 days and she was driving me to school and I was literally bawling my eyes out because I knew like I was so anxious I couldn't concentrate in school.
Mm.
And that dynamic was like all the time. I remember being 32, 33 years old and at work and like she wouldn't answer my emails or my phone calls. And at this point we're like running a business together and I actually needed to talk to her.
Yeah.
And so that it just was like maddening. It was like trying to, and that would be, I guess, like when you're in it, I
Mm.
realized because that was what I grew up in. I didn't know that wasn't how mothers communicated with their children,
And I guess, now, let's say, you guys picked up your relationship or there's someone else that gives you the silent treatment, you knowing what you know now and, emotionally resilient and all the rest of it, would be like, okay, off you go, come back to me when you're ready. And you would have zero kind of like self, thinking that this was anything to do with you. This is just someone else's coping mechanism.
Totally. I will say that took about 4 or 5 years to work out of my system, though.
Yeah, definitely. Because back then you are just in, what have I done? I've obviously done something wrong. But also, it's not even just like thinking you've done something wrong. It's desperately trying to get them to talk to you. It's desperately trying to get them to give you the attention that not, no, it's not the attention that you need, the reassurance that you guys are okay. Um,
Yeah.
so did you
I would say,
yeah.
can I just put one more thing in there? I would say also with a narcissist, a really subtle but sure clue is if they're always in distress.
Mm.
Like it's interesting because like they're always the victim. So if you're in a relationship and there's all these other signs and you're also noticing that like your partner or your parent can't get along with other humans, like
Yeah.
everyone's always wronging them somehow.
Yeah.
um that's a real sure clue.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And with also, did you notice with your mum with the silent treatment? Like if it was something that like, well, I say you have done in quotations, if it was something that was to do with you two had had a falling out, disagreement, or something had gone on with you, she would give the silent treatment. But would she also, if something didn't go right for her in life, nothing to do with you, whether it was
Mm.
something to do with another member of family or work or a neighbor or whatever, it was you that got the silent treatment again?
Not as much. Like I remember when she got fired from her job. We both worked at this large church together, and she got fired. So that's a good example. Had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Um, the manipulative part of that was like her crying to me and whining about, like, well, I say whining, but really painting the people that we worked for to be the villains, so that I got, like, again, kind of twisted into the position of having to be her defender.
Mm.
And actually ended up quitting that job, which was a really nice job.
Yeah.
and going into business with her, by ourselves, which was chaos. But yeah.
A good idea at the time.
Oh, again, one of those things that I like prayed about, but I was so clearly messed up on that one.
Yeah.
So I think it's more that, like, when they feel that the outside world has victimized them, then oftentimes, again, think about, like, with a physically abusive husband, they're going to put the wife in the position of having to defend them to the family.
Mm.
So if it, or, the job or whatever, like, it's more the dynamic. I mean, there's the silent treatment that really did have more to do with, like, me, or if I failed. And then on top of that, there's the, you're here to protect me from the world, essentially.
Mm. Yeah. Oh gosh. That, like, just listening to this, I'm like 34 years of like psychological abuse. It is. And so, like, when you that afterwards, and you're like, right, okay, goodbye. Obviously, you separated from your mom. Were you left with more like upset that it was over, or were you left with more like regret that you had had your entire life, like, at that point, taken from you? You couldn't even have relationships or anything. So what was the kind of main feeling when you made that break?
Definitely the regret.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I regret and relief. I mean, honestly, like, it got so bad at the end. She was so cruel. That she really made it, that part, easy after I said I was leaving. Easy. It emotionally, it was not. It actually took me a really long time to really grieve the relationship because she had made it so terrible.
Mm.
But I definitely was overwhelmed with a lot of, like, oh my God, I just massively felt like I needed to catch up in life. I hadn't gone to college. I hadn't dated at this point. I had never been kissed. There were so many, like, rites of passage that I just never had. I wasn't allowed to even socialize without her in my teenage years. So I never went to a party like that, or, I just didn't have the chance to learn my own lessons and grow, you
Mm.
know? And so, yeah, that was the scariest. And I would say until maybe like a year or so ago was still the worst part, is just this feeling of being so far behind and needing to catch up.
Mm.
And also not trusting myself because I did stay for so long.
Mm.
That's been the biggest nut to overcome, because you're violating your own boundaries over and over again.
Yeah. And then when you throw into the mix probably your biggest number one coping mechanism was your eating disorder. When you throw that into it, I mean, someone getting over, healing, kind of like recovering from an eating disorder is one enormous life challenge, which some people, don't get there. But you had to do that because obviously you got to a place where you're like rock bottom, which everyone does of an eating disorder because it just steals your life. So you're having to do that and mourn the relationship with your mom and figure out what the fuck that was. Like,
Yeah.
kind of repeat everything that ever happened in your life and sort of relearn everything. So, and just going back to the eating disorder piece, anyone listening who does have a coping mechanism during times of stress or just in life,
Yeah.
actually, when you do reflect back, kind of, it really served you having that relationship with food, even though it sounds completely messed up, whether it was binging or restricting. It was
So I
your
did both, guys.
Yeah, you're the shebang like myself.
Yeah.
it was your one and only escape from your mom, like literally your one and only. You didn't have a friend, you didn't have a partner, you didn't have anything. So it was your one and only get out from your mom.
Totally. And I remember like after I left, because there was a lot of binging just before I left. Like we were on this crazy diet, and part of it was like you literally binge for 2 days and then eat 500 calories a day for like 4 weeks or something. And so
Oh,
we would like binge the 2 days and then like make it 3 or 4 days into the diet and then be like, oh, we're gonna start tomorrow and like binge 2 more days, so like it was terrible. So then when I finally got away, like that was such an ingrained part of my pattern, first of all. And then I started like normalizing a little bit and just trying to figure out what normal was for me. But I remember anytime I would really hit like a pain point in my recovery, because I'm going to therapy at this point and I'm like in recovery groups, and anytime I would really hit something, I would find myself in the cabinet late at night, like stuffing my face till it hurt, like till my belly hurt. Um, and that was when I realized, like, oh, okay, this is a problem that I now have.
that
You
yeah, that actually you've separated from your mom. There's a separation now from that relationship, which will take time and all that. But your eating disorder very much was still there.
Oh
Hello,
yeah, yeah.
best friend. Yeah, absolutely. And that is, and I'm telling you, but you've done absolutely amazing. Your journey into recovery and, maybe still recovering, etc. But has been amazing.
Thank you. Well, and I will say, I recently realized, like what you said about it being an ally, like not only was it like my comfort and my coping mechanism and my way to stay sane, probably, um, through what I would just describe as 30 years of chaos. Um, I also believe that like the challenges that we have in life are like, they truly are our greatest teachers.
Mm.
And both of those challenges, my relationship with my mom and the eating disorder, have taught me and are teaching me, I'm still learning about trusting myself.
Mm.
And I've realized that voice that is even still in my head sometimes is trying to poke me so that I will get to the truth of my own voice, which is behind that wall.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's really the journey, I think.
yeah. And you are one of the lucky ones who is had the realization, made the very brave moves, but is also, has huge growth and self-development. And now, when we chat about what you're up to and all the things you're doing, like, you're really making up for that lost time, and you're absolutely thriving. So, it's so good that you've given yourself that opportunity, to go out into the world now, which sadly I'm sure some people never do, or it goes on another 10, 15 years. But just as like a final question then, there's going to be a million top tips you can give somebody, but for anyone who is, oh gosh, I've got so many end questions, but for anyone who is kind of like in it with a narcissist at the moment, or fresh out of it, trying to get out of it, what would be your kind of like number one top tip?
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so many.
Can I give one for if you're in it and one for
Yeah,
if you're
yeah, two different things. Yeah.
I would say if you're in it and you're in it, first of all, well done you. Like you've already won the gold medal if you actually recognize that this is an unhealthy narcissistic relationship.
Yeah.
And then I think my top tip would be find what really matters to you in life.
Mm,
What are you willing to stand up for?
mm,
And in however you can do that, start standing up for it. Start saying no or yes or whatever it means. Like I said, for me, it was being attracted to this guy. And I don't know why that meant so much. Well, I mean, I was 34, it's probably my biological clock, but
yeah.
like there's got to be something where you start pushing back.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be aggressive,
No. Yeah.
but that will truly show you what you're in.
Mm.
And I truly believe that that will give you the courage and the strength to make some choices. You've just got to start. Just start. And I would say, if you've just gotten out, just be so patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Um, that's the one thing I look back. Well, there's lots of things, but that's a biggie that I look back and I wish I had done, is be more compassionate towards myself. Because
Yeah.
when you really like it, especially if it's been really bad and then you just get out,
Yeah.
the amount of confusion and like it's a whirlwind. I remember I would be around people and literally
Yeah.
completely shut down,
Mm.
you know, and feel like something was terribly wrong with me.
Mm.
Um and yeah, so I would just say like no, it's going to be crazy and it's going to feel like your world is completely out of control, and you're going to, because you're so hardwired to believe that you are the problem, you're going to want to blame yourself all the time and fix yourself, and just love yourself like as much as you can. Just love yourself.
Oh, such good advice. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to, reach out to you or follow you, or they'll be intrigued by your story, what is your Instagram handle?
It's Katherine, so Katherine
Yeah,
dot Melinda.
perfect. I will put that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable. And I'm sure plenty of people are listening and thinking, oh, me too. And oh my gosh, so interesting. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye.